These comedians should be boycotted, or at the very least, branded traitors for the rest of their careers. Now, a bunch of comedians sold their souls to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia invited a bunch of comedians for a festival called the Riyadh Festival in Saudi Arabia, probably about 2 weeks ago now. Now, the problem with this controversial, if you will, festival was that it was in Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia, a lot of you know, they have a lot of human rights issues, but that's not the problem. The problem is that a lot of these comedians, went there making stupid claims as to David Chappelle saying that it's harder to speak freely in America than it is here. And he said that in Saudi Arabia at the comedy festival. Bill Burr, who I was a little surprised to be on this list, he made comments that were like, I thought you guys are going to be waiting for us with machetes saying death to America. I mean, you're in their country, you moron. And don't want to get into it. The political stance on these comedians and here in the United States, but then they go over somewhere that restricts free speech. Here in the United States, like Dave Chappelle could say what he want to say. Yes, he's going to get a little backlash for some of the things he said when he makes fun of gays and transgenders and other things he's said about like Trump and politics and things like that. But nonetheless, he's able to say it without having to worry about being killed. But in Saudi Arabia, you can't do that. In fact, in Saudi Arabia, saw a surge in executions this year alone. And they execute a lot of people who talk out against the Saudi Arabian government. And even if you talk about corruption within the government, you get executed. But the irony of these people going there talking about, like Dave Chappelle saying, well, I can't speak freely in America as well as I can here. When these comedians went to Saudi Arabia, they had to sign a contract stating what they can and can't say. That sounds like free speech restriction to me. Now, the name of this festival is called the Riyadh Festival. Again, it was in Saudi Arabia, and they invited a shitload of comedians. I mean, a lot. I was surprised at how many they invited. Now, there were a lot that said no, and we're going to go over the list of who said no and who went. But the problem, guys, is that these people went to a country that, again, some of these comedians are LGBT friendly, but they went to a country that's not LGBT friendly. They went to, a lot of comedians here talk about free speech and the problems they're having, but they go to a country that doesn't allow free speech. And again, that contract that they signed, it was put up by a female comedian, Korean comedian, if I'm not mistaken. It was this lady here. I think her name is Ashuko. I can't pronounce the last name. But she put the contract online stating what they can and can't say. And after reading that is why she turned it down. Now, the amount of money that they were offered varies, I guess, between different comedians. But one comedian stated that he was offered $357,000 to perform one show. A lot of these guys don't make that kind of money if they do 10 shows. Now, David Chappelle, Bill Burr, Kevin Hart, who's another one's on that list, they were probably in the million range, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe over $500,000. Sorry. $500,000 to $1 million. They had to have been in that range because those are top tier comedians. But these comedians ruined their career with a lot of people by going to Saudi Arabia. Now, there was a journalist in Saudi Arabia who was talking about corruption in Saudi Arabia and the corrupt government or government officials. His name was Turki Al-Jazar, and they offed him back in June because he spoke out against Saudi Arabia. So now you have these comedians, and again, Dave Chappelle talking about free speech is hard in the United States, but yet they just offed a journalist in Saudi Arabia for speaking freely. And a lot of people in Saudi Arabia who speak freely, they get jailed and they get executed. And imagine, they didn't even do anything harsh. They just talked about the government and they got annihilated for that. Here in the United States, you could say whatever you want and you're not going to end up in jail. You're not going to end up executed. So again, these comedians screw themselves right out of the gates. Now, this is the list of comedians that actually went to this. Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, Kevin Hart, Pete Davidson, who is not funny. I don't know what is it with this Pete Davidson. Everybody's all over him. This kid is not funny. He's never been funny, nor will he ever be funny. All right, he had one funny skit in SNL, but that was it. I don't know why people think he's top tier comedian. He isn't. Louis C.K., Aziz Ansari, Joe Coy, Chris Tucker, and then Tom Segura. A lot of these comedians, I was a little surprised they turned out to this, but nonetheless, they were there. Now, the comedians who refused. This chick, don't know her name, Shane Gillis, Nimesh Patel, David Cross, Mark Moran, Dave Attell, Stavros Halkias, and then Leslie Lyle. Now, again, these are the comedians that turned it down versus the comedians that took. Now, on the comedians that went, there were a few more that I didn't get to, write down. But there were a lot of comedians that were invited. I mean, that was some insane comedy fest. Now, again, this is the post that was put up by that Korean comedian. She put this up, and this is what it stated, right? It pretty much told them what they can't talk about. And it was a list of shit they couldn't talk about. So this is what turned her off to the whole contract, was that alone. So Saudi Arabia, as of right now, has 241 executions under their belt, and we are in October. The article was written back in July, so that was the number back then. It could be higher, but who knows? Point is, guys, a lot of those people were executed because of free speech restriction over there, or them taking a stand against the government, or talking about the government in ways they didn't like. Nonetheless, 241 people were executed. Now, some of those people were probably also executed for other reasons that I do not know of, but nonetheless, imagine offing somebody because they talked out against the government. And meanwhile, you have morons here who protest how America is not free. Yes, there are a lot of restrictions we do have, and there are a lot of restrictions that are coming down the pike, but we are still a lot freer than places like Saudi Arabia. In fact, you can't even pretend to be gay in Saudi Arabia, let alone be gay in Saudi Arabia, right? And so these people went to a country that do not respect anything other than a list of shit that you have to respect. That's a problem. These comedians need to be held accountable for their shit. And the problem is, a lot of these comedians are like Dave Chappelle, outside of his political shit, he's fucking funny. Bill Burr, he's funny. The other guy, Tom Segura, he's funny. Can't follow these people anymore, watch their shit because they sold out. And the crazy thing is now they're trying to, again, not even mental gymnastics, but they're trying to wiggle their way out of this situation and explain their way as to why. A lot of people have said, and I'm going to say this too, I would have respected them more had they just said, you know what, I took it because that money was, I couldn't turn it down. If you would have been like it was about the money, you would get more respect from more people. You'll probably still lose a lot of fans, but you would gain more respect for a lot of people if you would just been like, yo, it's about that money. Done. And everybody would be like, all right. But to now to sit there and try to flip-flop, wiggle your way out of this shit, you just look like an asshole. Anyway, guys, this is The Angry Prepper. Thank you for watching.